Bruchot habaot, ladies, and welcome to another edition of Torah Anytime, and for coming to our Ohel Sarah home. We hope that you had a good few days. So happy that you're here again for this series on Shlom Bait. Today we are going to discuss the characteristics of a man. Today we're going to learn which wounds in a man you should never step on. We're going to learn the warning signs and how to determine which areas of his personality will never change. Today we're going to see the beauty behind the bracha that you have in a husband, and that he's here ultimately to help you. So we're going to start by saying that women should be less bitter and angry. Hashem gave you a gift that you should feel happy about. What's the gift? Your husband. Your husband is supposed to be the diamond in your house. Your husband is meant to be the captain of the ship, the one who leads and sets the tone. First tip, your husband is a man. He's the captain. And the men who are captains feel they need to be respected. And therefore you have to be careful not to negate his words. When you negate his words, he's hurt, and then that turns into a very dangerous situation. There are some women that regularly contradict their husbands. And when they do, the husbands become very upset and annoyed and even hurt. Why? Because you hurt his feelings. You never tell a man the word no. One never tells a captain no. To a captain, the answer will always be yes. And I'm going to teach you a strategy that's going to help you in this area. Let's say your husband comes home and starts to ask you for a particular thing. You say, no problem. Then he starts to ask you for something else. You say, okay. You know what you do after that? You do whatever you want. You understand what I'm saying? But the first words he needs to hear are, sure, certainly, my pleasure, besimcha, whatever you say. Why am I telling you that it's okay to do whatever you want after he asks? Because believe me, he's not going to remember what he wanted after 15 minutes. Trust me, they forget very quickly. Even if he asks for chicken and you put steak in front of him and he says, didn't I ask for chicken? You say to him, oh, I thought you asked for steak. I'm sorry. Almost always, he's going to say to you, it's okay, you know what, steak is also good. But what is he going to remember? That when he asked for something, you answered in the affirmative. You were agreeable. Therefore, as a rule of thumb, to a captain, you never say no. Never contradict your husband or say no. When you're going to be more agreeable, you're going to see a man that's like a little cuddly cat. But if you're constantly saying no, you're going to see an angry lion. By the way, I'm teaching you now the secrets of creation. The secrets of creation. Don't hurt your husband's feelings or step on certain wounds you should never touch. There are certain points in a man's neshama that if you touch them the wrong way, you will have detrimental effects. Men have feelings, and believe it or not, they're sensitive creatures. There are women who can be very spiteful. I once heard a woman ask her husband, Shlomi, you want tea or coffee? He says, you know what? I want coffee, please. She says, no, I'm making tea. He said, but I want coffee. She says, you don't know what you really want. You don't know what you really want. What is this? The man is 50 years old and he doesn't know what he wants. If you decided you're making tea, why are you giving him a choice? And if you're already giving him a choice and he decides, why did you just take that choice away from the poor guy? Pay attention to his feelings, because a man can be very sensitive. A man doesn't like it when a woman responds in a negative way. So first tip concerning the characteristic of a man is, do not negate him or contradict him, especially not in public or in front of the kids. Second tip, treat him like the captain of the ship. To a captain, you never say no. Tip number 3 is, make sure the last word he hears from you is yes. After that, you could do whatever you want. Tip number 4 is, pay attention to his feelings, because men are sensitive creatures. Chachamim tried to teach us this in a very refined way. It says, En lecha isha hakshera banashim ela zu ha'osa et ratzon ba'ala. The most kosher woman among the women of Am Yisrael is the one who does the will of her husband. And by the will of her husband, I don't mean horrible things, averot, things like that. Ratzon, regular ratzonot. But do you see how Chachamim define a kosher woman? The rabbis didn't say that a kosher woman is the one who prays all day long and recites the entire Tehillim twice a day. What's the definition of a kosher woman? A woman who obeys the will of her husband. Osa et ratzon ba'ala. P.S. A lot of women write to me about sheitels and kisui rosh, and they say, my husband doesn't want to have to do the ratzon of my husband. Is it a mitzvah? Sure, it's a mitzvah to do the ratzon of your husband, but when your husband is doing an averah himself, and he's causing you to do an averah together with him, you have to ask a she'elah. You have to ask a she'elah. Not every little thing that a man asks is within the ratzon of Shamayim. Sometimes a man can bring detriment into his home when he asks you to do something in particular. I'm not going to get into what right now. But always ask a she'elat rav. Anyway, but the fact that a woman does the will of the husband, that's something that the husband enjoys to experience. And that brings up to tip number 5, which is try to do the will of your husband. Now, if you're irresponsive or answer him in the negative, you've injured him deeply because you're taking away the steering wheel from his hands. Men don't like it when you take away their steering wheels, because when the steering wheel is removed from the captain's hands, he starts to feel uneasy and agitated. En lecha isha kshera banashim elazu ha'osa et ratzon ba'ala. Question is there a limit as to how much obedience you have to your husband? Well, the Gemara tells us a story that some of you may be familiar with, but today you're going to hear it with an extra twist. The Gemara tells us a story about a young woman from Eretz Yisrael who married a young man from Bavel. The Aramit that they spoke in Eretz Yisrael was completely different than the Aramaic that they spoke in Bavel. It was 2 completely different dialects. So these two get married, the Sheva Brachot is over, and they start their life. On his first day of work, she asks him, what should I make you for lunch? And he answers her, Avidili klufche. Now in his dialect, he asked for rice with lentils. So she said, no problem, my dear husband. When you come home, it's going to be waiting for you. Nice, right? Nice. But in her dialect, klufche isn't rice and lentils. In her language, it means 2 lentils. Klufche. The Gemara tells us that this woman was a pinhead. I mean, it doesn't write pinhead. I'm saying she was a pinhead. She was meaning she wasn't the brightest and the sharpest tool in the shed. That means she really didn't have a mind of her own. Whatever her husband told her to do, that's what she did. She never thought. She never asked any questions. She never clarified anything. She just agreed. She just modimu mishtachavim. She took everything that was told to her in a literal sense. That being said, she boiled a pot of water and threw 2 lentils into the water. Ploop, ploop. Her husband comes home, happy and hungry. He sits down at the table waiting for his klofche. I can't wait. Rice and lentils. She comes to the table with a big pot. And she pours into his plate, boop, boop, 2 lentils. He looks down at his plate. He doesn't know what to make of this. He says, "That's it?" She says, "That's it." He says, "Where's the rice?" She says, "You didn't ask for rice. You asked for klufche. Klufche is 2 lentils. And that's exactly what I prepared you. Whatever you told me, that's what I did." Well, he realizes that there's a major miscommunication here, and the poor guy's starving. So he says, don't worry. I'll eat the lentils, but in the meantime, please go out to the yard, and you're going to see there a trei butzin baba. 2 watermelons. You could break them open at the doorpost, and I'll eat that because I'm starving. But in her dialect, butzin are not watermelons. They're 2 ceramic candle holders filled with oil. And she understood that she has to take these 2 ceramic candle holders, fill them up with olive oil, and then spill the olive oil over the head of the great Rabbi Baba ben Buta. After all, her husband did say, "Trei butzin Baba." So she did exactly what her husband told her to do, ladies. She filled up the candle holders with olive oil, and she makes her way to the Bet Midrash, happy to perform her husband's will. At that moment, Baba ben Buta was giving a lecture to his students. Suddenly, everybody's shocked to see that a woman comes into the Bet Midrash with 2 candle holders filled with olive oil, and she approaches Baba ben Buta, and boom, boom, she broke the ceramic candle holders filled with olive oil over the head of this great rabbi. Now, how would a modern-day rabbi respond to such an act? He would start yelling at her. He would throw the lady out on her ears. But Baba ben Buta was a very, very special man. He stood up with the olive oil dripping down his forehead, and he asked her, "Biti, madua asid zot? My daughter, why have you done this?" And she answered him plain and simple, "Kach tzivani ba'ali. This is what my husband asked me to do." Now, truthfully, what do you do with a woman like this? She doesn't see anyone or anything other than her husband. That's all she sees. Baba ben Buta understood what was going on, and he told her the following: "If you do the will of your husband in such an exact and precise manner, I bless you that you will give birth to 2 sons like Baba ben Buta, like me." A few weeks later, this woman became pregnant with twins. 2 sons were born to her. Those 2 sons overtook the leadership of Baba ben Buta when he passed away. They became the chief rabbis of Israel. And her husband, until today, is waiting for that watermelon. What can we do? What do we learn from this story? You could say whatever you want about this woman. You could say she's a nitwit, that she's foolish and empty-headed. You could say anything you want about her. But did she fulfill the will of her husband to the best of her knowledge in the most precise way possible? Absolutely. Chachamim say, look what happened to this woman. Because she fulfilled her husband's will in such a perfect manner, she merited to give birth to righteous children. Ladies, if you believe that there's a being in heaven that looks down and sees everything, you should know that if you fulfill your husband's ratzon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will fulfill your ratzon. But if you don't respond to your husband's will, then how can heaven respond to your will? A woman, an Em Israel, who does as her husband requests, and she doesn't contradict or refuse him, will merit to give birth to righteous children. And again, I have to preface this, I have to say this, that we're not talking about demands that a husband makes on a woman that is taking away from her integrity as a woman. I'm not talking about averot that a husband might want his wife to be engaged in. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about normal requests. But in general, Chachamim tell us that many of the issues that we find in rearing our children, where they are rebellious and defiant, is because it all started in the home. Did they see a mother who defies the father? A sgula for righteous children is a mother who heeds her husband's words. If you think about it logically, one of the most destructive elements in a home is when a child sees the mother negating the father. And the same is true the other way around. When a child sees the father negating the mother's words, that does not create a healthy and stable environment or a unified home. When a man negates his wife, it's as though he tied his wife's hands and the children can now take advantage of her. And then she's left, miskena, taking care of the discipline in the house when he goes off to work or to the Bet Midrash. But when a child hears you say, my darling children, this house has a captain. This mountain has its peak. The top of our mountain is Abba, and therefore we all have to respect him. You don't have to understand the inner workings of your husband in order to respect him. You don't have to psychoanalyze his childhood and get to know his inner child in order to turn him into the captain of the ship. All you have to do is be there for him and do as he asks. Because it brings him tremendous joy that he knows that just because he asked, you complied. When you treat your husband properly and with the honor that he deserves, then midah keneged midah, Kadosh Baruch Hu dispenses a lot of bracha your way, and honor is bestowed upon you in the Shamayim. Therefore, Chachamim tell us that the Isha Kshera is the one that does Ratzon Ba'ala, the will of her husband. Now, many women get frustrated when we tell them to do the will of their husband, and they start to get very agitated and wonder why the husband can't do their will. So for those women who are having a hard time with this concept, I want to add something else to everything else we've said until now. We're going to learn the idea from a different perspective. We mentioned earlier that the Gemara says, "En lecha isha kshera banashim ela zu haosa et ratzon ba'ala." Notice the wording. It says, "Et ratzon ba'ala." What does this mean? It means that she gives him a ratzon. Because of your influence, a man yirtzeh liyot nechmad. He will want to be nicer. He'll have the ratzon to speak in a refined manner because you're encouraging him. He'll have the ratzon to smile because you're making him happy. He'll have the ratzon to be a good father. A woman shapes and molds the ratzonot of her husband. A woman is a man's interior designer. That's what you are. So now let's go back to the Gemara. What does the Gemara consider an Isha Kshera to be? She who shapes the retzonot of her husband. She who molds the will of her husband. She gives him the opportunity to actually desire things in life that he may not have had the desire for, the ratzon for, prior to her involvement in his life. She encourages him to will, to want, to aspire to climb up the ladder, to pay attention to certain things. That's the meaning of an Isha Kshera. What an amazing chidush this is. Ladies, with your refined character and gentleness, with your warmth, with your charisma and sensitivity, you could guide and steer your husband towards positive retzonot, towards positive desires, towards positive will. Although a man seems a macho in his external makeup, you could direct him towards any destination of your choice. And he'll actually think he's the one in charge of the steering wheel all along. So ladies, we're going to discuss a story that many of us are familiar with, that the Gemara actually discusses. Some parts of the story you may have heard, and some parts you're not aware of, which I'm going to reveal to you today. But Chachamim in the Gemara tells us that there was a beautiful piece of jewelry made of gold called Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of gold. It looked like a crown that sat on the forehead of a woman, and it was shaped like the ancient city of Yerushalayim. Rabbi Akiva, alav shalom, who was a very poor man when he married Rachel, promised her that Be'ezrat Hashem, when he has the means, he's going to buy her this piece of jewelry called Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. Men have to know that this is what women like. That's not to say that women only want jewelry. No. A woman wants that her husband should be her piece of jewelry. A woman wants to hear pearls of wisdom coming forth from her husband's mouth. She wants to be reassured and comforted. Instead of a man promising his wife jewelry, he should present her with some hope for a brighter future. Anyway, now many of us know the story of Rabbi Akiva. Shortly after he marries, he goes off to learn Torah in the yeshiva, and he's there for 24 years because he didn't know anything. Upon his return, he had acquired 24,000 students. That's the story that we all know and love. But now we're going to learn about the story that isn't so well known to us. You see, on the first day that Rabbi Akiva was supposed to go learn in the yeshiva, Rachel wakes up all excited at 6:30 in the morning, and she tells him, Akivale, what a beautiful morning it is. Wake up, wake up. The birds are chirping, the roosters are crowing, and it's time for you to get up to go to yeshiva. He opens one eye and says, it's much too early. And boom, his head hits the pillow. At 8 a.m., she woke him up again, and she said, Akivale, you just missed the bus. Please wake up. And he says, forget about the bus. And boom, his head hit the pillow, and he falls back asleep and doesn't wake up until the afternoon. When he finally wakes up, and he sees his bride sitting there crying, he asks her, why are you crying? And she says, Ba'ali Yakar, my dear husband, you promised me that after the wedding, you're going to go learn in the yeshiva. And he says, true, I said that. And she says, so how come you're not going to learn? And he says, well, I don't really feel like it. I'm not in the mood of Torah right now. Not into it. It's not, I don't want to. What does a woman do when she gave up everything in life for the sake of this man, and he tells her, I'm not into this whole thing of religion. It's not really my thing. What should she do now? Some women would say, you're not in the mood of Torah? Okay, so I'm not in the mood of this marriage. And then she would run to the Beit Din for a divorce. What does it mean when a man tells a woman, I'm not into this thing and I'm not into that thing? When he promised and he gave his word and he says, all of a sudden, I'm not in the mood. I know I said, but. And she says, but you promised. And he says, true. But I didn't promise to keep my promise. Ladies, if Rachel, the wife of Rabbi Akiva, wanted to get divorced, she would have a good claim. But would she be right? But don't be a woman who's right. Don't be a woman who's right. Be a woman who's smart. Al tihi isha tzodeket, tihi isha chachama. Don't forget that chokhmat nashim banta beita. Shlomo HaMelech says, the wisest of women, each one built her home. A woman shouldn't feel that she always has to be right and that justice has to prevail. A home is not a courthouse. In a home, you don't seek out justice. You have to seek out peace. You have to seek out the shalom. When a man is in his, don't feel like it mode, or he's in a negative place, don't push him, because the opposite of what you want is going to happen. Rachel, Eshet Rabbi Akiva, teaches the women how to react in such a situation. What did she do? She left Rabbi Akiva alone. She didn't nudge him. She didn't agitate him. What did she do? She would have heart-to-heart talks with him. She'd wake up early in the morning to prepare a beautiful breakfast, very nice breakfast. And slowly but surely, Rabbi Akiva opened his heart to her and revealed the truth about how he was really feeling. He said, look, Rachel, don't think I'm stupid. I know that I promised you many things, and based on my promises, you sacrificed a life of wealth and prosperity and comfort to be my wife. I know that you gave up so much so that I should learn Torah. I'm not a tipesh, but do you know why I don't feel like learning? So she says, oh, please tell me why you don't want to go out and learn. I just want to know what's in your heart. And he says, I don't make an effort to go learn because I'm 40 years old. You want a 40-year-old man who's turning bald to be sent out with a knapsack and a banana to kindergarten? I'm embarrassed. All my friends are going to make fun of me. אני מתבייש. Rabbi Akiva is justified in his feelings. We would understand him. Notice how you suddenly understood him and you realize he's right. Even though weeks before, you were ready to disconnect yourself from this guy. So she tells him, wow, I never thought about that. You're right. It is embarrassing. You know what? I don't want you to go learn. What did Rachel do? She went to her father's farm, took the fastest donkey she could find. She bought 2 sacks of tomato seeds, and she went home. She planted the seeds and waited for the tomatoes to grow. When the tomatoes were ripe, she put them in baskets on the back of the donkey and asked her husband, Akivale, do you feel like taking a walk with me to the market today? And he said, sure. And so she and he and this donkey all went to the marketplace together. She placed the donkey in the middle of the shuk with all the tomatoes on him, and then they stepped away. All the people saw the donkey in the marketplace, and they were amazed at the sight of a donkey pretty much selling its own tomatoes. So no one sold anything in the shuk that day because they were so excited about this sight. The next day it was the same story. Rachel asked Rabbi Akiva if he wanted to go to the shuk. He said, sure, why not? And again, they all ventured out. Him, her, and the donkey. And again, she put the donkey in the middle of the shuk and she stepped away, and the same thing happened. Everyone was up in arms about this donkey, that everybody stopped working. The reporters were there wondering about this donkey who's selling his own tomatoes. No one worked that day. And then everybody went home. On the 3rd day, Rachel asks Akiva again if he wants to go with her to the shuk. He agrees, and they all set out to the shuk with the donkey. When they get there, they leave the donkey again in the center of the shuk. This time, it seemed like everyone was just minding their own business. The shuk was quiet. Business went on as usual. Nobody was making a big deal about the donkey anymore. Everybody went back to work. There were no reporters there. Everything was smooth, steady, and quiet. Suddenly, a man came to the shuk that hadn't been there the last 2 days. He took one look at that donkey and he started to scream. He said, oh my goodness, there's a donkey with tomatoes in the middle of the shuk. Everybody come here, you got to see this. So another guy approached him and he says, hey, why are you screaming like that? And he says, but look, there's a donkey selling its own tomatoes in the middle of the shuk. Listen here, there's a donkey with tomatoes and a donkey without tomatoes. Go home and leave us alone. Been there, done that. Rachel turned to Rabbi Akiva and she said, did you hear what that man just said? He said, yes, I heard. And she says, let's go home. And they go home. When they got home, she told Rabbi Akiva the following. She says, Akiva, how long were these people excited about the donkey? After a few days, everybody calmed down and went back to their normal daily routines. So you tell me, how long are people going to make fun of you? How long are they going to say, Akiva is an Am Haaretz and he's learning Torah at age 40? Maybe a day or two it's going to last, maybe a week at most. But then they're going to calm down and they're going to move on. But you will have one day become the Gadol Hador. You will have earned Olam Haba. You're going to climb the top of the mountain. I could feel it in my bones. The Gemara tells us that at the age of 40, Rabbi Akiva went to learn Torah, and he sat with the little children in kindergarten learning the Aleph Bet. He had to learn the letters and the vowels. He had to learn to read. And then he finally graduated kindergarten, and he went to learn in the yeshiva of the great Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer Aleim Shalom. And he was there for 24 years. And after 24 years, he returns to Yerushalayim with 24,000 talmidim that he acquired. And when everybody heard that a big tzaddik was coming to town, everybody closed their shops, and they all went to greet him and his students. You have to imagine the scene. Could you imagine the scene? Rabbi Akiva is walking down the road, and half a baseball stadium, that's 24,000 people, are walking behind him, while thousands are waiting to greet him. When word got to Rachel that her husband was returning after 24 years of being away, she dropped everything and ran to greet him. When she finally sees her husband from far and she wants to approach him, she realizes that he has so many students around him that it's virtually impossible to reach him. So she decided to push her way through the crowd. And Rabbi Akiva's talmidim started to yell at her, and he says, they say, hey lady, you can't push your way in like that. You're a woman, we're a man. It's not refined. Suddenly, Rabbi Akiva sees her, and he tells them, Tanichu la, let her go. When the students heard this, there was another Kriyat Yam Suf that happened on that day. The sea of people split, and Rachel walked between them so she could approach her husband. The students had no idea who she was, or why she was running so fast towards Rabbi Akiva. Finally, she stops and looks at her husband, whom she hadn't seen in 24 years, and she falls at his feet and she says, Shalom Alecha Rabbi Umori, welcome my rabbi and my teacher. The students are looking on, and they're not understanding what this dramatic scene is all about. So they ask Rabbi Akiva to explain. And he turns to them and he says, Shali v'shelachem shelahu. Everything that I acquired and what you acquired is in this woman's merit. All of the Torah that I know today and all the Torah that you know today is due to this amazing and strong woman. She was my engine. She was my transmission. If she wouldn't have helped me and pushed me in such an encouraging fashion, today I would have still been a lowly shepherd playing my flute. Who turned a shepherd into the Gadol Ador? This strong woman. It was a strong woman who knew how to bring out the best in her husband. She knew his character and dealt with his neshama in a gentle and compassionate way, with patience and with love. Ladies, when Rabbi Akiva returned to Yerushalayim, the people of the city prepared a lavish feast, and they placed him at the head of the honorary table. Rabbi Akiva sitting there among all the tzaddikim and Talmidei Chachamim of that generation, as well as all the philanthropists of the city. And which wealthy man also attended the feast? Rachel's father, Kalba Savua, the same father who disowned his daughter because she chose to marry an ignorant shepherd boy. He sat there at that table. The man who originally hired Rabbi Akiva to be his stable boy and looked at him as a lowly servant was sitting there at that table. Never in his life did Kalba Savua dream that the rabbi that the entire city of Yerushalayim was honoring was none other than his own son-in-law, Rabbi Akiva, who was once his stable boy. After the meal is over, and Kalba Savua still has no clue who this big rabbi is, he decides to introduce himself to the big rabbi. And as he starts to make his way to the dais, Rabbi Akiva sees him and doesn't know what to do. Kalba Savua kisses his hand and he introduces himself, still not knowing who the man is that's standing in front of him. And he begins to tell Rabbi Akiva the following story. He says, Rabbi, I have to tell you a tragic story that happened in my family. 24 years ago, my daughter decided to marry a lowly shepherd boy who was a bad-mannered ignoramus. I threatened her that if she'd marry him, I would disown her. But she claimed that she saw positive qualities, and against my wishes, she married the guy. Of course, I disowned her, and I feel terribly for her, because guess what? He took off. And I hear that he's been away for 24 years and still hasn't come back. Rabbi, what would you say about such an ignoramus? What would you say about a man that deserts his wife for 24 years? But you should know, Rabbi, that I felt so bad for my daughter that for years now I'm trying to do a hatarat nedarim. I've been trying to annul the vow that I made concerning my daughter so I can help feed her children. But there wasn't a single rabbi out there who was willing to absolve me of this vow because they claimed that I swore in such a strong manner that they didn't have the spiritual strength to release me of my vow. So I'm asking you, Rabbi, is there anything you could do to help me? Because I want to be able to support my daughter financially. Rabbi Akiva stood up. He gathered 10 men and he said, Kalba Savua, I want to ask you one question and then I will annul this vow for you. If you would have known that one day your son-in-law would become a Talmid Chacham, would you have made such a strong and harsh vow? So Kalba Savua said, but Rabbi, the man didn't even know how to recite the Kriyat Shema. How could someone like that ever become a Talmid Chacham? The guy didn't know a thing. But Rabbi Akiva replied, okay, so then I'm going to ask you another question. If you would have known that one day your son-in-law would become a Talmid Chacham like me, would you have made such a neder? Kalba Savua began to cry and he says, Rabbi, I would give anything to have a son-in-law like you. Rabbi Akiva looked him in the eyes and he said, I am your son-in-law. Ladies, Kalba Savua fainted. Wow. What a revelation this was. They had to revive Kalba Savua. In the meantime, Rabbi Akiva was busy reciting all the necessary tefillot in order to annul his father-in-law's vow. And when Kalba Savua regains consciousness and composes himself, he takes his checkbook and he grants Rabbi Akiva half of his entire wealth. In 1 second, Rabbi Akiva became a multi-millionaire. Halevai alenu. Ladies, what do you think Rabbi Akiva did with that check? You think he took it and danced with it all the way to the bank? You think he went to play in the casino? The first thing Rabbi Akiva did was visit the local silversmith. He put a large sum of money on the table and he said, I want you to begin designing the special piece of jewelry called Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. Rabbi Akiva never forgot the promise that he made to his wife. He was a true gentleman. He was a husband who appreciated the sacrifices that his wife made on his behalf. He was a real captain. A few weeks later, the silversmith notified Rabbi Akiva that the piece of jewelry was ready. Rabbi Akiva, the Gdol Hador, went to pick up this crown all by himself. And he placed this crown on his wife's head. Every day Rachel wore this crown with grace and pride. Wherever she went, she walked with her head held high and with this crown on her head. One day, the wife of Rabban Gamliel, alav shalom, who was the Nasi at that time, saw Rachel walking around with this beautiful crown. She was so excited about the crown that she went to her husband and she says, my dear husband, what about this head? I also want a crown. Rabban Gamliel told his wife, my dear wife, did you sell your kisui rosh for 24 years so that your husband could sit and learn Torah? Rachel used to sell her hair to make money. He says, you are the wife of a Nasi. You had a prestigious career of being the wife of a known Nasi B'Yisrael. You had a wagon, you had horses, a backyard, you had money, you didn't lack for anything. But in order to have parnasah, Rachel sold her hair for a period of 24 years in order to be able to put food on the table for her children. That's why it's appropriate for her to be wearing the crown upon her head. And with these words, Rabban Gamliel's wife was silenced. That's the basic story of Rabbi Akiva. Ladies, what do we learn from this story? Rachel took a precious diamond in the rough that had cold feet. She transformed a man who initially claimed, I'm not in the mood. I'm not into this thing. I'm embarrassed. I'm not really into religion. I don't know anything. This woman transformed this man into someone whom the Chachamim write, Vatechasarehu me'at me'elokim. You have made him slightly less than the angels. That was the level of Rabbi Akiva. You know what that means? Whoever doesn't know, let me tell you. That the teacher and the Rebbe of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who authored the Zohar Kadosh, was Rabbi Akiva. You hear who we're talking about? Rachel took a diamond in the rough at the age of 40 and she never gave up on him. She shaped and molded him, and from this was born a Gdol Hador. And ladies, this is a lesson for us all. Baruch Hashem, you're married, and you have the ability to shape and direct your husband's retzonot. Isha kshera osa et retzon ba'ala. Don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated by his manly stature or appearance, and not even by his ego. A man can appear very frightening at times, but behind all that muscle and that manly appearance, there lies within a big ball of Play-Doh. And you could take that Play-Doh and shape it and mold it and design it any which way you want. That's right, ladies. A man can be molded. Don't look at his manliness and think that he's stuck in his ways. Let's go back to the examples of the captain. The captain stands there in his manly uniform with all the medals on his jacket, holding the steering wheel of the ship, leading the sailors on the boat. He's the captain and you're the first mate. If you're going to try to take over the wheel by pushing him aside and saying, move, I see you don't know how to drive, you might find yourself walking the plank in the middle of the ocean. Never take away the captain's steering wheel. Don't put on his pants. Let him steer the boat. Yeah, but he's not going in the right direction, right? Okay, but don't yell at him. Don't put him down. While he's steering the boat in the wrong direction, you sit beside him on the bench. You want him to turn right because you know that's really where you should be going? You should turn on your feminine blinkers. And you should tell him, oh, my dear husband, right, Yamina, in the most gentlest of tones. One day, you'll see that he'll command the entire crew and he says, everybody, Yamina, we're going right now. All the sailors ask him, Captain, who decided to turn right? And he says, what do you mean? I decided. He actually thinks he commanded the boat to turn right. The next day you want him to go left. So you start to influence him positively. Left. Smola, my dear husband. Smola, la 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 la. Next thing you know, he's screaming, everybody smola. Who decided we're going left? Who decided? I decided, I'm the captain of the ship. He decided? No, he didn't decide. You decided. The beauty of this is that he actually thinks he's steering the boat and he doesn't even realize that he's really just feeling that feminine, gentle vibration whispering in his ear. A woman does not need to grab the wheel in order to see to it that the ship is being directed towards the correct destination. She could stay in the kitchen and with her magnetic pulse, she could direct her husband to the exact location that she wants him to be. That's the depth behind the idea of an isha kshera doing the ratzon ba'ala. Such a woman is a wise woman. The husband thinks that he made the decision, but he doesn't realize that his wife actually directed that decision. Ladies, that means you have such tremendous powers of persuasion at your disposal. Never grab the captain's wheel. Never tell him, move, I'll take over the wheel. No, you do just the opposite. Instead of grabbing the wheel, you direct him towards the goal. You have the power to do this. We're going to end here, and Bezat Hashem, the next session we'll discuss more attributes of a man. And I want to wish you all a good week, a week of simcha, beracha, v'siyata dishmaya. Amen ken, yehi ratzon.